Cat neglected for years finally gets a haircut that uncovers his real identity. Most of us had that moment growing up where we wanted to be a veterinarian, a zookeeper, or a crocodile wrangler. Animals themselves operate on the very edge of fun and dangerous, which makes a profession dealing with them seem seriously cool. But as anyone who truly works with animals knows, it's not all cuddly cats and rainbows. Animal shelter employees especially understand that as fun as working with animals can be, there's often a darker side that many people don't know about. Day in and day out, they see heartbreaking cases. And in 2018, Douglas County Animal Care and Services in Nevada saw one of the worst situations they'd ever seen. It makes sense why people want to work in an animal shelter. You get to hang out with adorable animals all day and help future pets in need. But any shelter employee will tell you that the reality is often much darker. Too often, people use shelters as a dumping ground for their neglected pets. Shelter supervisors like Liz Begovich understand better than most how every animal dropped onto their doorstep needs special treatment and a little TLC. They dealt with malnourished animals and abandoned pets before, and they were used to receiving overnight drop-offs. Still, Liz and her employees were not prepared for what they'd find when they arrived at the shelter for work. When Liz and her team saw the pet carrier in front of the shelter, they knew they were in for a tough day. It's never easy dealing with neglected pets, and this creature had seen the worst of the worst. Liz peered into the pet carrier on the shelter's doorstep and was greeted by a ball of gray fluff. It was shoved uncomfortably into the carrier, and they couldn't see its face. Still, Liz could tell this animal was more than just fluffy. "All we saw was a matted mess," Liz said, but it soon became clear that what they were looking at wasn't just a tangled mess of fur, it was alive. At first they thought it was a long-haired dog, but then the animal lifted its head and revealed the big blue eyes of a cat. "I've never seen a cat in that sort of condition," Liz said. Its gray fur resembled a rug, and it hung off the cat's body in matted clumps. A prisoner of her own hair, the cat could not move without being carried. His body was weighed down by layer upon layer of thick matted fur. The shelter knew that simply cutting out the matted mess wouldn't be enough. Besides, doing so is more likely to pierce the cat's already damaged skin. No, they had to take drastic measures. Liz and her team knew immediately what they had to do, and it wouldn't be pretty. They quickly brought the cat to the vet where he was shaved. But this wasn't your average haircut. The vet shaved 4.5 pounds of tangled, matted fur off the cat's body. When they finished, the fur filled a full-size trash bag. Without his confining, dreadlocked hair weighing him down, the cat looked like an all-new animal. Like how most people feel after a refreshing makeover, he had a new lease on life. Now he needed a name. They decided to call him Bob Marley, as a cheeky reference to the famously dreadlocked musician. However, it wasn't long after Bob was shaved that they realized he had an all-new set of problems a haircut couldn't fix. It became obvious how a cat, an animal known for its fastidious cleaning habits, ended up in such a horrible state. Bob was overweight. If a cat's too heavy, it can't clean itself properly, which can lead to disease and, yes, matted fur. The question wasn't how Bob ended up that way, but why his owner hadn't tried to help him sooner. It would have been obvious for months, even years beforehand, that Bob was suffering. They knew they had to find his previous owner. Normally, when someone leaves an animal after hours, there's usually more to the story. It's typically not a good Samaritan, Liz said. It's alarming to think what is more to the story in Bob's case. It's possible he endured unknown years of abuse. Luckily, the animal shelter reviewed their security footage and saw a video of Bob's ex-owner. An older man wearing a baseball cap had dropped Bob off at the shelter at around 5:30 a.m., hours before Liz arrived to open the shelter. In a passionate Facebook plea, the shelter shared the security footage and asked anyone who recognized the man to inform the shelter. While this was happening, Bob was getting used to his new look and taking some dangerous risks. Once the hair was off, he was walking around, Liz said of the newly energized Bob. "I saw him looking up at the counter thinking, I can jump up there." Bob wanted to take advantage of his newfound freedom, but it wouldn't be easy. Bob still had many obstacles to overcome. His weight for one was more than a couple extra pounds. At 22.6 pounds, he'd need a significant lifestyle change so he could be as mobile and as flexible as possible. Happily, one of Bob's main obstacles was easily surpassed when he was adopted by a loving family. Since he's already 10 years old, Bob has a lot of catching up to do when it comes to scratching up furniture and frolicking through the backyard. Stories like Bob's give other rescue workers hope because, believe it or not, Liz was not the only one to find an animal trapped under the weight of his own fur.